Hi everyone, it's Professor Edwards. We are going to continue our lecture series tonight for NMAC 3145 for our digital media studio class. We're going to start talking a little bit about cinematography. Cinematography and elements and principles of production and principles of photography and cinematography are essential skills to kind of get a base knowledge of in this class. We've been working with the DSLRs and your own point and shoots and camera phones over the last few weeks, and we're slowly going to start learning more about cinematography techniques to use in setting up shots and scenes for your work, which will lead us into moving into working with the cinema style video cameras. Cinematography is essentially the planning and execution of light and color design, camera position, and angles by the cinematographer in collaboration with the director on a project. And yes, cinematography is a collaborative effort along with the director in order to get the look, tone, and feel of a project. A lot of directors, like Steven Spielberg, Ridley Scott, take a lot of time and effort collaborating with their cinematographers. A lot of cinematographers, directors of photography, eventually themselves become directors because they got their start in the camera department and learning about cinematography and how to photograph images in their scenes. So, Steven Spielberg describes cinematography as storytelling through photographed movement. So, what does that mean? What is cinematography as far as we're concerned? Um, Cinematography is everything that has to do with the cameras and lenses, has to do with the film stock quality. And this includes, we're talking about film, but this also includes today's digital media equivalents. The things that we've been talking about, your cameras, your camera bodies, your lenses, your lens packages, exposure, light and dark, and ultimately the processing of film and digital images and how they're distributed today. Our main elements of cinematography are composition of the frame and mobile framing. Our frame shape, which we'll talk about when we begin to talk about codecs, is aspect ratios, widescreen, 16:9, this sort of thing we'll talk about. Camera distance, which are types of shots. You may be familiar with like close-ups, medium shots. Camera angles, how the camera is positioned to shoot a specific shot. Your level, height, and mobile framing, which include your camera movements and zooms. How do you move a camera on set? How does a specific shot get a specific focal point when you're pulling focus? How does it zoom in and out? Perspective, and then essentially point of view. We're going to be talking about all these things over the next few weeks. Our camera lenses, exposure choices, and techniques in the old days, when we were just working with nothing but film, were called photographic elements. Today, these are now things like graphic elements, graphics used. You have your camera choices, your speed of motion, your shutter speed, your lens type, what lenses you're going to use to shoot your projects with, a telephoto lens, a wide angle lens, how you set your lens, which is why the last few weeks you have been learning how to pull focus, how to set your aperture, what's your depth of field, how you set your ISO. Like you did last week with your ISO exercises, you're learning exposure issues. You're learning when something is overexposed, underexposed, or balanced. So what happens in cinematography? You do some pre-production before you ever begin to shoot anything. Pre-production is a big part of cinematography. You plan ahead before you shoot. And you do that by deciding how you're going to frame your shots. Some of the key things to ask yourself when designing your shots, and some things to remember, are: one, every scene and every shot tells a story. And you have to always remember your camera is the eye. So here's the key things to ask yourself when you're designing your shots. You are asking yourself, why are you here? What do you want? What do you want out of your shot? Why do you want it? Why do you want your shot to look this way? What do you do to get what you want? That means, how do I make it happen? How do I pre-plan? How do I do some pre-production for my shot to make it look the way I want it to? Where do you set your focus? We've been practicing focus over the last few weeks. And finally, ask yourself what else is in the frame? Who's featured? An actor? Is it an establishing shot where you're going to show a place, a space, a setting? Is it going to involve a character? Is it a close up? These are all things you're going to start beginning to ask yourself before you plan anything you film. So, focus today, what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, we're simply going to focus today on the following two things. Number one is camera angles, and number two is shots. So we're going to break this into segments. So today's lesson is on camera angles and camera shots. So camera angles. We're basically today going to talk about introducing you to 4 different angles for camera movement, how the camera is positioned as far as angles. The 4 we're going to talk about are high angle, a straight angle or straight on angle, a low angle, and finally the canted or Dutch angle. As far as your composition of the frame with angles, we're going to talk about briefly the high angle. Um, this is a still from Psycho from Alfred Hitchcock, and this is a high angle shot. As you will see, the camera angle is above the eye level of the performer in the scene. Psychologically, this adds to the depth, the tone, the feel of how the scene is portrayed. Here we have an example of a straight angle or a straight on angle. And it's pretty straightforward, pardon the pun, when you look at the composition of how straight angles are. Straight angles are you're looking at your performers straight on. There's no angling involved. You're pretty much flat with the horizon. We're going to start to talk in the next couple weeks about horizon and your different breaking the barrier, breaking the wall. Well, this is a straight on angle. You are simply viewing these actors straight on through the camera. This works really well for dialogue shots. We have the low angle. In a low angle shot, the camera angle is usually below the eye level of the performers in the scene. Psychologically, this reinforces the effect of the low angle shot is that it makes the subject look strong and powerful. So take a moment and look at the 2 images. On the left is a scene from The Birth of a Nation for 1915. This movie, when it came out in 1915, was really controversial and to this day still is. Involves a pivotal scene that includes a low angle shot of members of the KKK. And as you can see, the low angle looking up at the members of the KKK on the horses gives it a terrifying, powerful, strong feel. Same when you look with the picture on the right is a still from Psycho. Anthony Perkins at camera is very low. Above him, even creepier, making creepier, are like the owls that are in the background that are mounted on the walls. So again, a low angle is going to give you that effect that makes the subject in the scene look strong and powerful. And then finally, our last composition of frame we're going to talk about is our canted frame. Canted frame is also known as a Dutch angle. Vertov was the first director to really use the canted frame, canted angle in his work. As you see here, some examples of Vertov's work where in his Man with a Movie Camera, they're different images of how the camera is not level and is not on the horizon. So canted frames definitely include cameras that are not level. They're not horizontal. So when the camera is not horizontal, it gives the eye like a look of distortion. It makes our brains think like, what's going on here? This isn't what I normally see when I look at an image on the screen. Dutch angles are used often to suggest and reinforce tension, trouble, and distress within a scene. In a Dutch angle, the camera leans toward either screen right or screen left. Look at the image below and you will see the camera is leaning. It produces an imbalanced off-center look to the image, and filmmakers use the Canada Dutch angle to capture that feeling of stress and disorientation. The term Dutch angle actually originates from the German word Deutsch, which means German. In 1920s German expressionism films, filmmakers used candid angles in many films like Nosferatu. If any of you had me for the Intro to Mass Comm 2202 class in the spring, we looked at Nosferatu as an example of a silent movie. A lot of dark, like weird, altered angles in that film. This picture on the right is an example of from the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and it has that look and feel with the Dutch canted angle. The camera is tilted. It denotes and reinforces that world of madness, and it's off kilter. It's an anxiety-filled world of uneasiness. Something to be aware of, and something that you, as young filmmakers, kind of look around, and you're always capturing and taking in what's coming out and what's new and who's emerging. Framing can become a director's signature. There are examples of framing of all kinds, and which include using natural framing occurring within objects. Quentin Tarantino is probably one of the most famous directors that does this. Tarantino is especially known for his low angle shots. He even has a signature kind of like video homage to them. And this is a scene out of Reservoir Dogs where it is one of his famous low angle trunk shots. When we're done with the lecture, we'll look at some of the clips from his films where he uses this low angle shot and talk a little bit about how effective it is in telling his story and reinforcing what's going on within the story. But within this shot, the camera is therefore placed within an object, the trunk of a car. Now we're going to move on to our shots, our type of shots, which refers to our distance of our camera placement in getting that shot. Types of shots we're going to talk about are the extreme long shot, the long shot, a medium long shot, a medium shot, a medium close-up shot, a close-up, and finally the extreme close-up. You may be familiar with a few of these terms, but first let's start talking about the extreme long shot. An extreme long shot, sometimes referred to as extreme wide shot, either is correct, but for our purposes, I'm going to just keep it at extreme long shot. The ELS is an abbreviation you'll see in notes, on script notes, things like that. An extreme long shot can be taken from a great distance, and I'm talking up to quarter, third, half mile away from the subject, and essentially shows the whole figure of your subject and provides context for the scene. This comes from a still from The Great Train Robbery, and as you can see, you have your subject, the guy standing on the train, but you're also provided like the scene around it, in a mountainous situation with a train and the guy standing on top of it, looking out, trying to see what's ahead. So it's providing you, the viewer, with some context for the scene. Next, we have a long shot. A long shot is essentially a wide shot that it allows for the placing of your subject, your actors, in their environment. The point of focus is your subject. As you see, this is a still from Nosferatu. And as you can see, Nosferatu is center frame. He is the focus. He is the subject. He is our focal point. But the environment is also somewhat visible behind him. So you get an idea of where he's at, but he's taking up the majority of your eye line of where you're looking in the long shot. A long shot is one of the basic camera positions in which a camera is set up at some distance from the subject of the shot. And when referring to a person, a long shot means they take up almost the full frame height. You can see this in the example below. If you see the boy leaning against the fence railing there, height-wise in the frame, he is taking up in the foreground the majority of that full frame height. And this is used to, again, stress environment and setting. You get an idea that, oh, he's probably like at his home. He's standing in front of his fence. There's a house in the background with a car. But he is where your eye tends to focus, like, because he's in full frame height. Next, we have one of my favorite shots, the medium long shot, which is also known as the Western shot. It can also be referred to in industry slang terms as knees to head, or the American shot. Take a look just for a minute and look at the three actors in this scene. What does it say that we're talking about a medium long shot or Western shot? Especially look specifically knee to head level. You can see all three actors shot from the knees above to their head. The medium long shot, Western shot, got its name as a Western shot because it was frequently used in Western films as it would start at knee level and could feature talent, feature actors from the knees up, and would ultimately, stumbling over my words here, and would ultimately reveal the weapon of our hero, the cowboy. It was usually holstered right at the waist. So this is an example of Howard Hawks' trademark style, featuring John Wayne. As you can see, the camera, like the frame, right begins at the knee and goes as you look up, you see the entire like knee to head area is in focus, and you see that weapon at the waist. You constantly are reminded your eye is looking like towards the middle of the actors because that weapon is there at the waist level. So medium long shots are especially useful when you have two or three actors that are in a scene. So you can shoot people kind of if they're seated from below angle, if they're kind of like knees to waist up, and you can kind of balance how you're using that different angle. But it got its shot kind of beginnings originally out of like old Hollywood westerns and the old days. Our medium shot is one of the basic camera positions in which the camera is set up to record from full to half figure shots of a performer. These examples where you see right here Nosferatu and Modern Times from Chaplin, you see the recorder, the performer is pretty much full to half figure in the shot. They are the focus. You don't really have an idea of their setting or their place behind them. The talent is the feature. The medium close-up is often used in dialogue scenes between characters. That way you can have a nice shot with characters talking to each other. It's used, like I said, in dialogue, sometimes in over-the-shoulder shots, which we'll talk about later in another lecture, and with like interview setup. So you can have, as you see an example from Wayne's World, you can have Wayne and Garth in the same scene talking at the same time, sitting on a couch, having dialogue. And then the example from Silver Linings Playbook with Bradley Cooper is an over-the-shoulder shot, which is also a medium close-up. So we'll talk about the over-the-shoulder in the next lecture. And then we have a close-up, which a close-up, you're probably one of the elements you're familiar with as far as camera shots. It's one of the basic camera positions that's in filmmaking. The camera is simply set up in a close proximity of the actor's face. Here you see the camera is close to the actor, so they are featured in the frame prominently. And then finally, we go to our extreme close-up. Our extreme close-up is where the camera gets right in and shows extreme detail. As a director and cinematographer, you would need a very specific reason to get this close to something in this detail. You see here the picture of the eye, an eye looking through a peephole, an eye looking through a keyhole. Directors tend to use this to get that extreme close up, especially like what's going on within, another room and somebody's peeking in. They're going to get this extreme close up of an eye, like spying on someone, seeing who's out there. So extreme close-up, camera gets right in and close, shows extreme detail, and you got to have a specific reason you're going to get this close to your subject. Other shots that aren't named for their shot distance, which we're going to address in our next lecture, include the establishing shot, master shot, we have 2 and 3 shot, reverse shot or reverse angle shot, point of view shot, which is a subjective shot. So this is going to end our portion of this lecture for tonight. Thank you for coming to class. And now we're going to talk about, well, we're going to look at some clips. And we're going to talk about how many camera techniques, how many angles, how many different shots we can identify. First one we're going to look at is John Carpenter's original Halloween trailer from 1978. So if Dr. Keith or one of you could cue that up, we will start there. And then we'll look at some of the other clips that I have loaded for us in D2L. All right, thanks you guys. Have a great class. I will talk to you soon.